Okay, so we're going to continue the theme of angles, and for this video I am just going to cover the vocabulary of this lesson. So we're going to talk about angle pairs in this lesson. And the first type of angle pair we're going to learn about is adjacent angles. And adjacent angles are two angles that are part of the same plane. They share a common side, they share a common vertex, and they share no common interior points. So I'm going to draw an example of that. So I'm going to draw one angle, its vertex, one of its sides, another one of its sides, and I'm going to draw 3 points. So I'll do A, B, C is this first angle. Okay. The second angle I'm going to draw is going to be adjacent. So I'm just going to actually draw one other side. I'm going to give that side the letter D. So that means angle ABC and angle CBD. Those are adjacent. Okay, so we talk about the interiors of them. This interior of ABC is totally separate from this interior of CBD. And I just want to illustrate they share, I'm going to use a marker for that. They share this side, and they share vertex B. So angles that are sharing a side and a vertex are adjacent angles. Adjacent means next to. Vertical angles. Vertical angles are two angles whose sides are opposite rays. So an example of vertical angles are usually formed by two intersecting lines. Okay, so I'm going to draw that, and I'm going to label these angles with numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in this case, angle 1 and angle 3 are vertical. Okay, angle 2 and angle 4 are vertical in that situation. So angles that are formed by opposite rays, their sides are opposite rays. So I think of it as two intersecting lines, and these angles are kind of opposite from each other in those intersecting lines. So vertical angles. Next, complementary angles. Complementary angles are angles whose measures have a sum of 90 degrees. Complementary means the angles have a sum of 90 degrees. Each angle we call the complement of the other angle. So an example of complementary angles, I'm going to draw a 90-degree angle, a right angle, okay? And I'm going to draw just a ray, and it's not necessarily cutting it in half, okay? But in this case, angle 1 and angle 2 are complements, okay? So that's an example of two angles that are adjacent and complementary, because these two angles share a side, they share a vertex, and they create a 90-degree angle. So when you see that little square in an angle, that means that angle is a right angle or 90 degrees. Another example of complementary angles, they don't have to be adjacent. I could have this angle being 30, and let's say this angle is 60. Those angles are complements of each other, even though they're not adjacent. They don't need to be adjacent to be complementary. And then finally, supplementary. And this is the big confusion, is complementary versus supplementary. So try and commit that to memory, that complementary means angles that add to equal 90. Supplementary, angles that add to equal 180 degrees. So I will give a couple examples of that. I'm going to draw a line. And I'm going to draw these two angles. Now these two angles have a sum of 180 degrees because a line is 180 degrees. Excuse me. So angles 2 and 3 are supplementary. We also call this special type of a pair of supplementary angles, we call this a linear pair. Two angles that form a line. So that's an example of two angles. We don't know their measures. We don't know what they are, but we know that they add to equal 180. Another example of supplementary angles could be, I have this angle here. Let's say this angle is 20, okay? And let's say this angle is 160. Those are supplementary even though they're not adjacent. So it's understanding there's different types of supplementary angles. There's different types of complementary angles. So this part of the lesson is really important because you need to know what I'm talking about when I use the term adjacent, when I use the term vertical, when I use the term complementary, when I use the term supplementary. So I do want you to take a minute after this video to work through the next part of the lesson, which isn't the rest of the notes. You're going to come back to these notes eventually, but I do want you to just practice the vocabulary.